We are currently in Zurich, the financial center of Switzerland, also part of the Crypto Valley. Today, we are meeting with a Bitcoin early adopter, the co-founder of the Swiss Blockchain Federation, and the co-founder of the longevity fund, Maximon, Marc Bernegger. But it's raining out there, so let's get inside. Thank you, Marc, for being with us. I would like to go back to what is bringing you to us, Bitcoin in the first place. From my understanding, you purchased Bitcoin in 2012. Can you explain your journey into Bitcoin?
Yeah. Thanks to host me. I was always interested in emerging technologies. I got my first computer with a modem when I was in high school, more like by coincidence, and started my first internet business in '99 as a high school student. And back then the internet was also something strange and unknown and unserious. So somehow I was always intrigued to focus on new and emerging technologies. And that's why when I looked into how the future of money to exchange value could look like based on technology, I got in touch with the white paper of Satoshi Nakamoto for the first time in 2011 and was fascinated. But on the other side, there were also other initiatives like e-money and other things. So I maybe forgot. And in 2012, when I did some more research, I decided to buy my first Bitcoin, less as an investment naturally, because I think not too many people back then had already the anticipation of what evolved out of it. But that was for me the first real interaction, and then naturally meeting more and more people in this early Bitcoin community made me more and more convinced that it's more than just an interesting idea.
Why did you understand at that time right away that it could be a store of value instead of just a media of exchange? At that time it was like the digital cash.
Yeah, that's right. And that was also, based on the white paper, still one of the core ideas. Naturally, as a tech entrepreneur and somebody, I built and exited 2 internet companies where we also ultimately just digitized existing value chains. So by seeing as an entrepreneur myself how the digital revolution, the technology, literally the ICP, TCP protocol changed new ways of doing business, this paradigm shift for me was naturally also somehow happening in banking and financial services. And when you look at the core of Bitcoin and limited supply and naturally the increased demand over time, and maybe not being a gold bug, but understanding why gold in the monetary history of humans became a store of value over many thousand years ultimately, it became more and more obvious that in a world which becomes more and more digitized, there also needs to be something digital gold, right? Which is a little bit the term today. And just by digitizing a store of value, I think Bitcoin had just a perfect infrastructure and concept behind.
How was it perceived in Switzerland at that time?
In the very early days, it was also here a very small community. I remember one of the few persons, Niklas Niklaisen, who founded Bitcoin Swiss, was literally the first person I had regular exchanges about the topic, or Lucius Meisser, who then started the Bitcoin Association. I think back in 2013, we already have an email thread where we thought about why not doing a Bitcoin ETF in Switzerland, so a little bit ahead of the time. It was a small community, but naturally, and one of the bigger triggers was then, among others, when Ethereum launched out of Switzerland. Vitalik Buterin, he lived here. His office is still in Zug. And that was maybe a little bit like the kickoff where it became a business. Because before we had also 2 of the first Bitcoin core developers who studied in Zurich. So there was already the technology and the mindset of a decentralized government here in Switzerland. But I would say the trigger to really see the business potential came after the Bitcoin time frame. And actually then this term of the Crypto Valley Switzerland, the Crypto Nation Switzerland evolved. And I think especially around 2017, 18, 19, there was a little bit like the Switzerland as maybe the leading jurisdiction. Unfortunately, I think that changed in recent years. But back then, Switzerland was a little bit like the epicenter of the whole industry.
Could you explain why Switzerland has been that open-minded to welcome the crypto companies, the crypto foundations? What is the main reason of that?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few reasons. One is again, that when Ethereum looked into where to set up the foundation of everything, which then became Ethereum, they realized that in Switzerland, with this foundation law and also the decentralized infrastructure from a government and legal perspective, that is in essence what you need to have the regulatory framework to start a project out of then Switzerland. And there were a few very smart lawyers who also understood the potential. Because, I mean, now looking back, it's obvious that it's a big and relevant industry, but back then it was just a few crazy geeks wanting to change the world, right? And I think that was a little bit the starting point. And then many others of the early projects followed. And I think on the other side, it's really also this understanding. I mean, Switzerland as a direct democracy and a decentralized system with direct democracy votes and everything, that this is maybe to a certain extent what blockchain in a digitized way wants to achieve, right? This decentralized approach. And that's why many people say Switzerland is, without even maybe knowing, a little bit like the old-fashioned footprint or example of how the blockchain would structure a government or a country, right? And on the other side, I think the libertarian approach, which is also to a certain extent part of the history in Switzerland, right? We never had aristocratic leaders, we never had king or queens. So it was always a little bit more like a foundation by the people till today. And that's maybe also by design endorsing some of these blockchain-based business models.
So it's been over a decade since you first purchased Bitcoin. What do you think of it today?
Yeah, I mean, many things changed, and naturally, I mean, people are always referring to the price, and the price is to a certain extent also a validation of the value and the impact, but unrelated to the price, I think what was a crazy idea of a few futuristic technologists and maybe not even realizing how far this impact could go, it now became mainstream, right? I mean, we have the biggest institutions, the most powerful individuals looking at Bitcoin as something which is maybe digital gold or a digital long-term store of value. And this is, I think, fascinating. And I mean, avoiding all the noise on social media, right? Where some people which came many years later claim that they already knew what's going to happen. I would say even some of the earliest Bitcoin people are to a certain extent surprised to see that this crazy idea to a certain extent really became reality, right? And again, I mean, the price is what drives attention and coverage and media and speculation and money. But if you really think through, I think this non-governmental backed technology, computer-driven approach of a long-term store of value is something which is needed in a digital world, especially now moving maybe in an accelerated phase with AI and everything. And that's why it will be interesting if Bitcoin is ultimately really also challenging the existing fiat and government-backed monetary system, because that was originally one of the elements, but maybe really only in a far, far future. And now literally just, I don't know, 15 years later, we see that some of these crazy ideas become reality.
What do you think of the rest of the industry? Would you consider yourself as a Bitcoin maximalist?
That's a good question. I mean, I would say naturally in the beginning there was not even the term, because there was nothing but Bitcoin, and I, to a certain extent, I met all the Ethereum founders before they even started, and I was fascinated by the idea to build something additional, but for me it was always something different. It was not the next Bitcoin, it was really something different. And that's why I follow naturally what happens besides Bitcoin, but from a Bitcoin maximalist perspective, it's unrelated to a certain extent, right? Which doesn't mean that it's not relevant, but to be honest, just from a very pragmatic perspective, I don't see too many real-world use cases till today where everything after Bitcoin really had an impact on everyday's life. I mean, I would say if you go on the street and talk to people and unrelated to the price and where they're trading or speculating, what really impacts the life of people, I don't see many things after Bitcoin which to a certain extent really have a tangible outcome. Which automatically then leads to the conclusion that, besides Bitcoin, I today at least don't see many interesting fields where I would like to spend my time on. But that might change, and maybe also it takes more time. And as I said, maybe it's just something unrelated to the idea of Bitcoin, because this blockchain-based approach, there would be a lot of interesting use cases, but maybe they should be unrelated to tokens and speculation and really more focused on technology, which is unfortunately, and that's maybe the most disadvantaged element of crypto, right? That it's always related to money and trading and speculation and less about technology.
Among your other interest fields, you shifted to longevity. First of all, what does longevity mean to you?
I mean, for me, it's ultimately increasing the quality of life. That's first, a better health span. So not ultimately live for 1,000 years, which is a little bit more like science fiction. But naturally, I think we will all live far longer than you would expect. But ultimately, it's really about the quality of life, which also starts today, you know, so not just when you're already old and sick. And I mean, for me, it is similar to my other entrepreneurial activities. As I mentioned, 99, my first internet business, and then Bitcoin a few years later. And longevity was also something, I mean, I'm personally following it since 2009 when I met Aubrey de Grey at the conference. Aubrey de Grey is a bit like the godfather of longevity. And already back then he talked about the first human who will live for 1,000 years is already born, which literally led many people leaving the room. And I was fascinated and approached him and literally via him realized that many of these crazy ideas in the last few years became more and more tangible. And then when we sold Crypto Finance Group together with my today partner and co-founder, back then chairman of Crypto Finance, we both had this common shared interest in longevity and decided to fully focus on that. So after literally 10 years internet and then 10 years Bitcoin, I'm now starting my third topic with longevity since 5 years now, yeah.
Early on, you know, crypto was often and still actually compared to scam, and it can be the same with a longevity startup. How should we find the most interesting thesis with longevity? What are the most surprising or the most interesting fields to look at?
Yeah, I mean, you're completely right. And honestly, with the internet, it was also the same, right? When you started in 99, it was really drug trafficking or, I don't know, porn or all these unserious things. And with Bitcoin, naturally the same. And with longevity, I mean, also you have a lot of snake oil, the term, everybody can use longevity, right? So it's not like based on any foundation. So I think what's important that you have to somehow focus on science. And that's maybe a difference to other industries. I mean, there's science behind, very boring biology, stem cells. So you can't just make things up. And then ideally you can somehow measure and track it and prove it, right? And there it becomes blurry, right? Starting from supplements and some longevity treatments, what has really an impact, not just today, but long term. But that's a little bit my approach, right? I mean, naturally, you also have to sell your product and services. So if it's just pure science, then you won't really build a successful company. But you always have to somehow look at what's the outcome, and ideally you can measure and track it, right? And I think this is also becoming more and more a necessity in the industry, because I think 5-10 years ago it was just a nice topic to talk about, and we live longer and healthier and forever. But now it's really at the stage where everybody expects also some tangible results.
I know that Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase, another crypto company, also invested into a longevity startup. Is there a connection between, you know, early successful crypto investors and this longevity thesis?
I mean, Vitalik Buterin supports a lot of initiatives. You have a few early Bitcoin and also crypto people being very active in the field, and also a lot of crypto money. going into longevity research as well. I mean, one of the common elements is maybe not too different than in my case, that some of the earliest Bitcoin people, they are just interested in questioning the status quo, right? And maybe also, build companies or invest in companies in very early phases, which really have a moonshot disruptive potential. And I think what Bitcoin was 15 years ago, I mean, naturally you have other exciting topics, robotics, space, AI, maybe that's already at a different stage. But longevity is still with the ultimate frontier and dream, right? I mean, you can have all the Bitcoin and you can have all the things you can buy, but as soon as you get sick, everything loses value, right? I mean, naturally, health is more valuable than everything you can buy, right? And that's why, you can also say this health is the new wealth, right? And especially if you have a certain level of wealth, then ultimately you will fully focus on your health and ideally to extend your health and life, because you want to enjoy your life as long as possible, and maybe also together with your family and kids and grandkids. So that's why I think, many people, and there are also studies, right, they would give away the majority of all their money if they could just have a longer, healthier life, right?
Is there a connection or convergence between a long-term durable currency, Bitcoin or gold maybe, and durable and healthy human beings? Do you see a bridge between these two concepts?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think, ultimately, it's a little bit about sustainability and long-term perspective, right? I mean, again, if you only live on a short-term speculation or short-term lifestyle way, that's okay, but naturally then it has some influence on the long-term effect, right? And I think with longevity and with Bitcoin, I mean, naturally you have short-term developments, but I think the core is still having a long-term impact. So it has this long-term sustainable perspective, and that's why I think longevity as a long-term store of value for forever, right? Unrelated to any, I don't know, gold nuggets from asteroids coming to Earth and then destroying the price of gold, because Bitcoin has a mathematical limitation in the supply, right? With extending the health span of humans, it has maybe a close correlation to that. I mean, I wouldn't say that we are now going for immortality. That's still, I think, a different field and topic, but naturally to have a sustainable long-term perspective on your life is maybe going a little bit into the same, it has the same ethos than many of the long-term Bitcoin believers.
What is the most overlooked investment thesis right now, according to you, in crypto or in the longevity field?
Yeah, I mean, what I think, but that's already starting, right? I mean, as soon as you reach the stage where Bitcoin becomes a trusted long-term store of value, it will be also used as collateral and asset you can literally use to build your house and literally build a generational wealth on it, right?
Without selling it.
Exactly. And I think that's something, I mean, naturally that's already happening, but I think that's still in its infancy, because why should anybody today, if you believe in the long-term value of Bitcoin, sell your Bitcoin just because you buy something else, right? And I think that's becoming a big demand, especially also for the next generation, right? That they can believe or stick to their belief that they want to keep their Bitcoin, but still use it to cover their short-term expenses. So I think this collateralized use of Bitcoin is becoming a huge mega trend. I mean, nothing completely new, but I think it's still in a very early stage. And I think it's also essential, because this will generate an even more fixed or increased demand, right? Because you have more and more people who are really then hodling forever, right? And in longevity, naturally, the convergence of, let's say, this moonshot kind of approaches where you need 10, 15 years to what you can already do today. And I think we will see so many, also ultimately by using AI, indications what works and what works not, that these development times will shrink dramatically. I mean, this is a case not only for longevity, but in health and drug development in general. So a huge increase in speed. So I think all these models who anticipate it will take 15, 20 years until we move from a sick care to a preventive care health system, I think they by far underestimate the acceleration of the developments in the coming years. So I think this is also something for longevity and health-related fields where we see a tremendous increase in speed, which naturally also changes the metrics of how you generate money in the status quo or incumbents dramatically. So all these big players should ideally already they move on the other side, right, from sick care to preventive care, even by then to a certain extent destroying their existing business model.
Self-custody or ETF?
Yeah, it's a mix. I mean, naturally, when you're in Bitcoin since the earlier days, you will always have self-custody because that's a little bit how you got into it. And I think it's still one of the foundations of Bitcoin especially. But on the other side, and that might be hopefully changed, but I mean, from collateral and all kind of other traditional use cases, you also need part of it, at least, on your traditional old-fashioned bank account. So I would say it's a mix. Yeah.
Bitcoin or Swiss franc?
Yeah, I mean Swiss franc. If you're still in fiat, I think, and luckily as a Swiss, most of my fiat is in Swiss franc, so I profit from the global devaluation of currencies. But ultimately, yeah, on the long run, I would also fully bet, unrelated to what kind of fiat on Bitcoin.
Healthy or wealthy?
Ultimately, on the long run, healthy, yeah.
Marc, it was really great speaking with you.
Thank you.